The fog on Asteris Prime hid more than graves. It held secrets that could shatter a man's world. When Callan Drain followed his dragon into the mist, he never expected to find a child with his late wife's eyes, and a truth so powerful it would turn grief into a mission of destiny. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The fog on Asteris Prime rolled across the memorial fields like a tide that never receded. It was thick, heavy, and alive with a silence that pressed into every soul that walked there. Among the rows of polished stones, Callan Drain moved with the steady rhythm of ritual. He came every day, never missing. No matter the weather, no matter the weight in his chest. Callan was once an interstellar ranger, a man whose life had been built on discipline and courage. Now, at 42, docked. Then, his broad shoulders slumped with burdens that armor could never protect against. He came to visit the grave of Mariel, his wife, his partner, and his light. The stone was engraved with her name and the words, "Beloved dreamer, beloved wife," taken too soon. Though the letters were hidden by the mist, he did not need to see them. They were carved into his memory as deeply as into the granite. Beside him walked Solara, a hunting dragon. Her scales, once vibrant with a metallic blue shimmer, now faded to a dull gray. She had been Mariel's gift to him on their wedding day. Many had said dragons were dangerous, that they were not meant to be companions. But Mariel had believed in their intelligence, in their bond with those who loved them. She had been right. Solara had stayed loyal through every trial, and in grief she mirrored Callan's sorrow. Each morning, Callan laid a single lotus on Mariel's grave. The flower glowed faintly against the stone, its petals catching the dim light of the twin suns that barely pierced the fog. He always whispered the same words, "Another day without you, Mariel. Solara misses you too." On this day, the ritual was broken. Solara's head suddenly snapped up, her crystal eyes widening, her spines flaring with a ripple of electric blue. She gave a trill, sharp and piercing, and then lunged forward, tearing her leash from Callan's hand. "Solara," he called, startled. The dragon dashed between the rows of stones with purpose, not confusion. Her movements were precise, urgent, as if she had found something hidden in the mist. Callan's body responded on instinct. Years of combat training forced his legs to move, carrying him quickly after her. The fog curled around his boots, and his breath grew sharp with both fear and anticipation. Ahead, he saw a small figure. A child knelt in front of a plain memorial stone, his shoulders trembling as he wept. The boy was no older than 5, slight and fragile, in a midnight blue jacket with pale stripes across the chest. Callan's heart faltered. The sight of a child alone in a place of death was painful enough, but what came next left him frozen. The boy turned at the sound of Solara's approach. His eyes lifted through the mist, and Callan saw something he thought he would never see again. Amber-green eyes, flecked with gold, the same as Mariel's. The boy did not flinch at the sight of Solara. Most children were taught to fear hunting dragons, but instead, the boy's face lit with recognition. He dropped to his knees, holding out his arms. Solara circled him once and pressed her head into his small hands, a sound of relief and affection rumbling from her chest. "Solara," the boy whispered, "I knew you would find me." Callan's breath caught in his throat. The impossible was unfolding before him. Solara had only ever bonded with Mariel, and to a lesser extent, with Callan himself, yet here she was, responding to this boy with joy and certainty. Before Callan could step forward, another figure emerged from the mist. Tall, well-dressed, and commanding, The man's coat shimmered as it adjusted to repel the damp fog. His silver hair was perfect, his eyes cold and measured. A small insignia on his collar gleamed, the mark of the Celestial Heritage Trust, a powerful and wealthy foundation known across the colonies. "Loosen," the man said, his voice smooth but firm. "You mustn't wander off." He placed a gloved hand on the boy's shoulder, pulling him gently but insistently away from Solara. The dragon hissed, her spines lifting, but she did not strike. Her bond held her in a tense silence. The man turned his gaze to Callan and offered a polite smile that never reached his eyes. "I am Darius Halvern," he said. "I apologize for any disturbance. The boy has a vivid imagination. I am his legal guardian." Callan tried to speak, but words failed him. Halvern's grip tightened on the boy's shoulder, guiding him back into the mist. "Goodbye, Solara," Lucen called softly, his voice carrying through the fog. The dragon answered with a long, mournful keen, a sound Callan had heard only once before, the day Mariel died. Callan stood rooted to the ground as they disappeared into the gray. The mist felt heavier than ever, the world tilting beneath him. For more than a year, his days had been defined by sorrow and repetition. But now, a new uncertainty had pierced the fog. The child's eyes, Solara's reaction, the presence of Darius Halvern, none of it fit into the numb rhythm of grief he had built for himself. As he walked away from the cemetery, the single glowing lotus still lay on Mariel's stone, a faint light against the darkness. Callan's chest tightened with a strange new weight. Grief was no longer his only companion. There was something else now, something sharp and unfinished, and deep inside. Though he did not yet understand it, Callan had just taken his first step into a truth that would change his life forever. The walk back from the cemetery felt endless for Callan Drain. The mist of Asteris Prime clung to his clothes, weighing him down as heavily as the thoughts pressing on his mind. He had seen many strange things in his years as a ranger, but nothing unsettled him like what had happened in the memorial fields. Solara's reaction to the boy, a boy's eyes so much like Mariel's, and the cold presence of Darius Halvern, all of it circled in his head, refusing to let go. When he finally stepped into his small house on the outskirts of the settlement, he expected silence and stillness, the kind of emptiness he had grown used to since Mariel's death. Instead, Solara was restless. The dragon moved back and forth across the hardwood floor, claws clicking against the surface, her tail lashing in agitation. Callan removed his heavy coat, but his eyes never left Solara. She stopped pacing, only to push her snout against a cedar chest in the corner of the room. The chest had been Mariel's, one of the few personal items she had carried from Earth when they moved to Asteris Prime. He had never opened it after her passing. It was too painful, too full of memories he wasn't ready to face. "What is it, girl?" Callan asked softly. His voice cracked from disuse. Solara pushed against the chest again, this time more insistently. She let out a soft trill, a sound that carried both urgency and affection. Callan's chest tightened. He walked to the chest and knelt beside it, his hand hovering over the lid. The hinges were old-fashioned, brass worn from years of use, but the lock recognized his touch. As the lid opened, the scent of cedar and faint traces of Mariel's favorite perfume filled the air. It was a fragrance that had not faded, a mix of lotus and lavender, and it struck him like a physical blow. Inside were Mariel's belongings, neatly arranged just as she had always kept things, her journals, carefully stacked books, and folded sweaters, each piece a reminder of her ordered mind and caring heart. For a moment, Callan simply sat there, staring at them, letting the ache of memory wash over him. But Solara was not interested in any of these items. The dragon nudged Callan's arm, directing his attention to a smaller box nestled among the belongings. With trembling hands, he lifted it free. It was simple, unadorned, sealed with a magnetic lock that required either his or Mariel's biometrics. When the lock disengaged, Callan opened the box and froze. Inside were baby clothes, tiny socks, a silver rattle, and a hand-knitted sweater no larger than his palm. The sweater was cream-colored, soft to the touch, carefully folded as if waiting for the day it would be worn. Callan's breath faltered. Disbelief churned inside him. He had lived his life under one truth. He could never father a child. The doctors in the coalition military had been clear. An old injury had left him unable to have children. Mariel had accepted this, or so he thought. They had built their life together around that reality. Yet the evidence was in his hands. These baby items contradicted everything. Solara stepped closer and lowered her head. Callan held out the small sweater, and the dragon sniffed it. Her crystalline eyes brightened. Her tail swayed gently, and she let out a trill of recognition. This was not a neutral reaction. This was connection, memory, proof. The boy at the cemetery, Lucen. Callan sat back, his mind spinning. It was impossible, and yet every instinct told him it was true. Mariel had carried a secret he never knew. As the hours passed, sleep remained far away. Callan sat in the dim light of his home, the baby clothes spread out on the table before him. His grief was now tangled with confusion, anger, and a sharp determination. He turned to his data terminal, his fingers moving across the holographic keys with practiced skill. Though years had dulled his combat reflexes, his training as a ranger had not faded. He searched for every piece of information he could find on Darius Halvern and the Celestial Heritage Trust. On the surface, the organization appeared flawless. Endless smiling children in their care, awards from the coalition, donors praising their humanitarian efforts. Darius Halvern himself appeared as a model of generosity, his name linked to schools, orphanages, and relief projects across dozens of colonies. But Callan's trained eye caught what others missed. The perfection was too smooth, the articles too polished, the records too uniform. In his experience, perfect surfaces often hid the deepest cracks. He leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. Solara lay nearby, restless, her gaze fixed on him. She knew, just as he did, that something was terribly wrong. Callan looked again at the small sweater on the table. Solara's earlier reaction to it, her recognition, lingered in his mind. There was no denying it now. The child he had seen, Lucen, carried Mariel's blood. A thought came to him with chilling clarity. Mariel must have hidden the truth, not out of betrayal, but out of protection. She must have feared Darius Halvern, feared what power and wealth could do if he ever learned of the boy. Callan's grief shifted. It was no longer a crushing weight, but something sharper, more focused. For over a year, sorrow had defined him. Now a new purpose took root. He would uncover the truth. He would protect Lucen. The quiet house no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a command post. Mariel's secret was no longer buried. It was alive, and it demanded action. And Callan Drouaine, once a broken widower, now began to feel the stirrings of the soldier he used to be. The morning after his discovery, Callan Drouaine sat at his table with Mariel's box of secrets spread before him. The small knitted sweater, the rattle, the tiny socks, all of them stared back like questions carved into fabric and metal. His hands trembled, but his resolve no longer wavered. Something had been hidden from him, and Solara's reaction made it undeniable. Mariel had left behind more than memories. She had left behind a son. Yet how? The question echoed in his mind. The doctors had told him the truth years ago. No children, no future heirs. Mariel had accepted it with him. And yet the boy he had seen at the grave carried her eyes, her spirit. He needed answers, and the past year had taught him only one thing. The dragon never lied. Solara had known the child instantly. Callan remembered something Mariel had once said in passing. She had a sanctuary, a place she called her thinking ground. It was a trail through the azure wood glade. A forest of towering blue-hued trees that grew at the edge of the memorial fields. Whenever her research overwhelmed her, she walked there for hours, alone, letting the silence guide her thoughts. He clipped Solara's harness to her, his voice rough. "Come on, girl. If Mariel left us answers, that's where we'll find them." The air in the azure wood glade was different. Thick with the scent of damp earth, and faintly glowing with the blue light filtered through the trees. The canopy was dense, twisting branches spreading wide to block much of the sky. The ground was littered with ferns that shimmered faintly under the twin suns. The forest felt timeless, as if it carried secrets too heavy to be spoken aloud. At first, Solara followed the path calmly, her movements quiet and deliberate. But as they pressed deeper into the glade, her behavior shifted. Her nostrils flared, her head rose high, and her body tensed with purpose. She pulled forward, ignoring the path, weaving between thick trunks and low branches. Callan quickened his pace, his breath sharp in the cool air. "What is it? What do you sense?" he asked, though he already knew Solara had found something that belonged to Mariel. They reached a massive tree, older and more twisted than the others. Its roots coiled like serpents into the earth. Solara stopped, gave a sharp, keening cry, and began to dig at the base with frantic urgency. Dirt and roots scattered as her claws tore through the ground. Callan dropped to his knees, his heart pounding. "Easy, girl. Let me." He pushed her aside gently and dug with his bare hands. The soil was cold and damp, clinging to his fingers. But soon he felt the edge of something hard. He pulled free a small metal container, heavy and weatherproof, built to last. With shaking hands, he opened the seal. Inside was a letter, sealed in protective film. His breath caught when he saw the handwriting. It was Mariel's. He tore the film away and unfolded the paper. His world narrowed to the lines of ink, her words speaking across time as if she were standing beside him. "My dearest Callan," it began. The letter told of a miracle. During his long deployment to the outer colonies, she had discovered she was pregnant. Her joy had been mixed with fear. She wrote of sleepless nights, of wonder, of the quiet hope that maybe fate had given them what doctors said was impossible. But woven into her joy was dread. She spoke of Darius Halvern, a man who had once courted her respect for her research, but had grown dangerously obsessed. She feared his influence, his power, his interest in their child. "I had to hide him," she wrote. "I had to keep him safe. Our son, our Lucen. I don't know if you'll ever find this, but I believe you will trust Solara. She knows the path. She will guide you." Callan's eyes blurred as the words struck deep. The paper shook in his hands. Mariel had kept the secret, not to deceive him, but to protect their son from a man who would have stolen him away. He lowered the letter, the forest spinning around him. Grief still cut at him, sharp and merciless. But now it was joined by something new. Purpose. Determination. Solara pressed against his side, her scales cool, her eyes steady. Callan whispered, "You knew. All this time you knew." The dragon trilled softly, not in sorrow, but in reassurance. Callan folded the letter carefully and placed it against his chest. He no longer felt like a broken widower clinging to ritual. He felt like a soldier given a mission. His wife had trusted him to uncover the truth. She had trusted Solara to guide him. Now he understood. As they left the Azurewood glade, Callan's mind sharpened. The path ahead was no longer clouded by grief. Darius Halvern had taken his son, cloaked in wealth and false kindness. The Celestial Heritage Trust was no sanctuary. It was a cage. Callan walked out of the forest taller than he had walked in. His shoulders straightened, his pace firm. He was no longer a man who lived only in memory. He was a father with a cause, a ranger with a mission. And though the fog of Asterisk Prime still hung heavy across the land, inside him a new light had awakened. The forest had given him Mariel's truth, and with that truth came the fire to fight for his son. Night fell over Asterisk Prime with a heavy stillness. The settlement glowed faintly in the distance, but Callan Druane stayed in the shadows. For days he had studied the compound of the Celestial Heritage Trust. Darius Halvern's empire looked pure and perfect on the outside, but Callan had seen enough in his life to know when perfection was a mask. From a ridge beyond the compound walls, Callan watched the routines of the night guards. He mapped their steps, timed their pauses, and noted the blind spots between the security cameras. It was as if his old training as a ranger had been waiting for this very moment to come alive again. Solara crouched beside him, silent but alert. Her scales reflected only faint hints of moonlight, her body blending into the darkness. She had become his partner once more, no longer just a mirror of grief, but a creature of focus and instinct. "Tonight, we find the truth," Callan whispered. When the last patrol turned the corner, he moved. His steps were steady, practiced, his breath even. Solara padded quietly at his side. They slipped past the outer fence at a point Callan had already weakened earlier that day. Inside, the compound was strangely quiet. Colorful murals of smiling children decorated the walls, glowing softly under dim security lights. But in the silence of night, those painted smiles seemed to watch with suspicion. He reached a side window and worked the lock with a thin piece of metal. It clicked open with ease, sliding inside. Callan entered an administrative office that smelled faintly of polish and artificial sweetness. The building was immaculate. Every surface gleamed. Every file was neatly aligned. Callan's eyes narrowed. He had lived long enough to know that such order was rarely honest. Perfection was often the cover for something deeply wrong. He moved quickly to the main office at the heart of the building. The door bore Halvern's nameplate. The lock resisted at first, but with patience it yielded. Inside, the office was as precise and controlled as the man himself. Shelves lined with awards, photos of children, and glowing articles spoke of benevolence. But Callan knew better. He searched the drawers, and soon he found what he had come for. A file with Lucen's name. Inside were documents declaring Darius as the boy's guardian. Callan studied the signature on one page, his breath tightening. It was Mariel's name, but stiff, mechanical, wrong. It was forged. His hands moved quickly, photographing the papers with his datapad. But when he opened the next drawer, his blood ran cold. Inside were dozens of files. Each one carried the name of a child. Notes filled the margins. details of transfers, placements, and financial records. There were no official court documents, no legitimate adoptions. Instead, it was a network, a system that moved children across colonies like pieces in a trade. Halvern's trust was not saving children, it was selling them. Callan's jaw tightened. He documented every page, every record, each proof of the crime. The camera of his datapad flashed silently in the dark office. Outside, Solara gave a low growl. The sound was a warning. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Callan's heart pounded, but his years of training steadied him. He slid the files back into place and closed the drawers with quiet precision. He moved to the window, his body low. A guard passed by, flashlight beams sweeping the hall. Solara hissed softly from outside. ... And the sound drew the guard's attention away for just long enough. Callan slipped out, closing the window behind him. Back beyond the compound walls, he exhaled. Solara nudged him once, as if to remind him the mission was not yet complete. Callan now carried the proof he needed. Halvern's empire would not survive the light of truth. The courts of the coalition would see the forgeries, the false guardianships, the children turned into transactions. But more than that, Callan carried hope for Lucen, for the son Mariel had fought to protect. As dawn crept over Asteris Prime, Callan returned to his home. The mist was lifting, glowing faintly under the rising suns. He spread the documents across his table, each one a weapon of truth. For the first time in years, his grief felt less like chains and more like fire. Solara curled nearby, her eyes bright and watchful. She had led him here, step by step, never wavering. Callan looked toward the horizon. In his mind, he could still hear Lucen's voice, calling Solara's name through the fog. It was not a memory to be mourned, but a promise. A promise of reunion, of justice, of a future not stolen. The widower who once lived only in sorrow was gone. In his place stood a father with purpose, a soldier reborn not for war, but for truth. And as the sons of Asteris Prime climbed higher, the shadows of Halvern's lies began to fade. What remained was the dawn of something new, hope, forged from grief, carried by love, and guided by the bond of a dragon.